Now to Capitol Hill, where former special counsel Robert Hur spent hours defending his investigation into President Biden's handling of classified documents. Republican lawmakers questioned Hur, a Trump-appointed former U.S. attorney, over his decision not to indict Biden, while Democrats criticized Hur's characterization of the president's memory and mental state. Last month's report found the president, quote, willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. But it ultimately concluded the evidence does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, in part because of innocent explanations for the documents that we cannot refute. Hur also said he found several material distinctions between Biden's case and the charges against former President Trump, noting that Biden cooperated with the investigation, whereas Trump did not. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Edo O'Keefe reports.
I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly.
Former special counsel Robert Hur's public grilling today at times looked more like a proxy fight for the White House. Republicans raised questions about President Biden's mental fitness.
What I'm trying to figure out is whether or not Biden's lying because he's still so senile.
While Democrats aired unflattering footage of former President Donald Trump.
An anomalous, really an anomalous.
Hur defended his report and its contention that the president was a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
My task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully. I could not make that determination without assessing the president's state of mind.
Democrats said he went too far.
Mr. Hur, you cannot tell me you're so naive as to think your words would not have created a political firestorm. You understood that, didn't you, when you wrote those words?
Congressman, politics played no part whatsoever in my investigative steps.
Hur questioned the president for 5 hours over 2 days in October and wrote that the president forgot key dates, like when his son, Beau, died. But a 258-page transcript of the interview released today shows the president remembered the month and day, May 30th, just not the year. After the report was released last month, the president blasted Hur.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that?
Today, Hur explained.
The need to show my work was especially strong here. The Attorney General had appointed me to investigate the actions of the Attorney General's boss, the sitting President of the United States.
Several Republicans accused Hur of letting the president off easy.
All I have to do when I'm caught taking home classified materials to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Herbert, but I'm getting old. My memory's not so great.
And Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the White House. Ed, we've talked about Hur's report a lot on the air, but we finally heard from him. What were they trying to achieve through this piece of theater today?
And theater is what it was ultimately. It's officially supposed to be a chance for him to answer questions about the specifics of the investigation, but almost from the word go, Democrats especially tried to use the forum as a way to equate what allegedly happened with the current president with what's gone on with the former president, airing clips of him mispronouncing words and terms and confusing people he was trying to talk about, President Obama versus President Biden, Nikki Haley versus Nancy Pelosi. Democrats, in essence, trying to neutralize the concerns about age for President Biden by saying former President Trump is just as bad in this realm if you're somebody concerned about this. Republicans walk away from this unhappy in general, A, because he didn't charge them, and B, because Hur's report even does point out that the charges against the former president, Donald Trump, are so much more serious and start far broader in scope. About 80 documents were found in the possession of Biden or in his residence and in his offices, more than 300 in the case of Trump. The current president willfully submitted to the 15-month investigation and sat with her for 5 hours over 2 days last fall. The former president has not done things like that. Democrats were eager to call that out. Republicans push back and raise questions, too, about the senility of the current president, which drew ire from a lot of Democrats, saying, look, you're just trying to make something out of nothing. And here at the White House, John, they see this as case closed.
Yes, they see this case closed. Wouldn't it be pretty to think so? But is that, in fact, the case because of the, this report said what it said, and there's now been conversations about even though the transcript of the interview that was released showed a much more mixed picture of the exchange between the special prosecutor and the president, is it, in fact, case closed in terms of what the White House has to do to counter what was in the report? Maybe in the report, not so much the testimony today.
Well, no, it's not, because as long as there are concerns about his age and whether he's too old to do the job, they're going to have to continue to fight this. They obviously tried to do that last week with his State of the Union address and the performance he gave there. And Democrats today took full advantage of something that they knew was being aired live and uninterrupted across multiple channels to raise the point about the other guy and say, if you're going to be concerned about the age and experience of this president, you ought to be raising concerns about the Republican nominee as well, the presumptive Republican nominee. So it's not going anywhere. They're going to have to deal with it. But for now, at least, it's over. Oh, and by the way, they're going to create a special task force here at the White House to ensure this doesn't happen again in the future.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. So that we can stop all this foolishness. Ed O'Keefe for us at the White House. Thank you, Ed.